Hey, Wendy.
Hi there, how are you?
Good. I'm going to really quick practice my screen share. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is
Awesome.
what, okay,
Good.
this is what it's going to, that's the actual stuff on the slides is going to look really technical, but the way I'll narrate it,
Ooh,
it'll be, I'll just focus on, why it's important and what we're doing.
yeah, that sounds great. I liked that diagram with the speeds.
Yeah. It should be helpful for people who they hear us talking about this CBRS and like, what the heck is that?
Right.
It just kind of frames it up.
Yeah, that's great.
So, and I don't know what the particular order you want to do on the agenda is, but just it might, since I'm going to kind of go through the very basic background of what is it, why did it come about, and why is it important that we're using it? And then that might be a good intro to then, once I get through that, then South Bend can say, here's what we're doing with it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Whatever you think. I agree. I think that sounds like a good order.
Yeah.
People can understand South Bend and what they're saying maybe a little better.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, did you send out something with the agenda? I know you did, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I probably just scurried right over it. Hold on, let me find it.
Just had it pulled up too.
Oh, it's probably on the slides, right?
Oh, it sure is. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I am doing the welcome and introductions.
Yeah.
That's right. This is my meeting.
Yep.
Yep. Good reminder at 10:26.
Right.
So yeah, we'll have Amy say hi, and then we'll do our Riedl. Denise, I assume it's pronounced Riedl. Is Denise on the call yet?
Nope, just us still.
Okay.
Let me see.
We'll do the community announcements at the end. We probably won't go a full hour, but you never know.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you just advance through the slides
Yeah. I got those open
so I
too.
can see? Because that'll guide me. That will help guide me
Okay.
once I get started.
So you want me to run the slides for you?
Do you mind?
No, that's fine.
Okay, there's
Just making
Marlene.
sure I
Yeah.
got it
Hi,
here.
hi, Marlene.
Hi, good morning, Tom.
It's you, me, and Wendy so far.
Hi, Wendy.
And
Hi there.
Thank you for sending the information.
Yes.
there you go. That's perfect, Wendy. That would help me if you did that. And then when I'm ready to do my thing on CBRS, I'll just have you stop sharing the slides and I'll share mine.
Okay, perfect.
Team effort.
Yep, we got this.
Woohoo! Good stuff.
Got the game plan.
There we go. And it's good that we plan ahead on these things. So, yeah. That's it. Excellent. I'm going to go off camera just for a second.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, Ina.
Hello, Ina.
Hey, hey.
How are you?
Actually pretty good. Glad this week went by fast.
Yeah. Do you have a break in classes as the semester winds down? No.
Getting ready for the summer. So, yeah. I take that back. I think I took the last week in May just to get ready for the summer. So I won't be doing any programming that week.
No Jamaica this year?
It's too early to say.
Never
Not saying no.
know. Could pop into your schedule.
To pop in and just roll out the KCI and just go.
Hi, Leslie. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene.
Now, what does your picture say, Leslie? I can't see that. Can change the world. What is that?
Well, I'll read it. Never doubt that a small group of,
Oh, yeah.
it's a Margaret Mead.
Eleanor Roosevelt. Isn't that Eleanor Roosevelt?
Margaret Mead.
Margaret Mead. Sorry. Yeah. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Mhm.
How's your week been, Marlene? Been busy?
It has been, but sort of, they all seem the same. So,
Mhm.
Pretty much.
It's been a busy week. We had a visit from the Richmond, Virginia Chamber of Commerce
oh,
Oh.
wow.
on Wednesday. There was a 61-person delegation, and they came to do a tour of the PCs for People warehouse.
Wow.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
61 people.
61 people. Yep, they came in a big tour bus, and I had to have like a Bluetooth headset on so they could hear me as we walked through the warehouse. It was really cool.
Hmm.
Are they setting up a program like yours?
Not necessarily. It was an exchange visit between the two chambers of commerce, and I
Oh.
think they were in town for like 3 days,
Mhm.
just visiting all kinds of different things, and just they put us on the agenda. So I think they do have a lot of businesses interested in donating computers and, recycling and redistributing computers. So
Aaron probably mentioned, but we're consulting with National LISC, and LISC Virginia in Richmond is one of our locations we're working with.
yeah, he did mention that. Well, we're about 2 minutes in, and I'm gonna just give 2 more minutes to see.
We're oddly low on our attendance today. It feels
Yeah,
like.
it's it's Derby week. Tomorrow's the Kentucky Derby, so I'm sure a lot of people are getting ready to place their bets and
I'm sure that's
getting their-
exactly what it is,
yeah,
Tom.
getting their hats, fancy hats and colorful dresses ready.
It's all the
and-
hat shopping.
Yeah.
Mhm. And the mint julep ingredient making.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Getting the crushed ice ready and getting
I
all
have
the
fresh
good
mint in
bourbon.
my tea. I grow it out in my front
There you
yard.
go. Yeah, I'm gonna I hear people joining as we go. I'll get started right at 10:35. We'll give everyone a 5-minute window to join. Welcome to those of you who are joining. We're just gonna give it another minute or two, and then we'll get started. There, I see Patrick from South Bend. Hello, Patrick. Welcome.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yep, looking forward to it. We'll jump into the agenda here in less than a minute here. Just going to give a couple more people a chance to jump on, and then we'll get started. All right, well, I'm going to officially open our meeting. Welcome to all of you to our monthly Kansas City Coalition for Digital Inclusion meeting. My name is Tom Esselman. I'm the Managing Director for PCs for People in Kansas City, and I'm excited to be here on this Kentucky Oaks Day. You have to know I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, so the day before the Derby is when all of the 2-year-old horses get to run their big race, and it's called the Kentucky Oaks. And then tomorrow is the Derby. That's for the 3-year-olds. So for those people who want to avoid all of the public spotlight around the world, which will take place tomorrow, the locals tend to go big time for the Kentucky Oaks. So for those of you who are getting your crushed ice and mint juleps ready for tomorrow, I salute you. Anyway, this is the Coalition for Digital Inclusion, and our vision and mission is on this slide. And I'm grateful to Wendy Pearson from the Kansas City Public Library for assisting me in today's presentation. If we go to the next slide, please, and I will walk us through our introduction. We are a coalition that's loosely made up of volunteer organizations and individuals, and we have a steering council that consists of Carrie from the Kansas City Public Library, Aaron from KC Digital Drive, myself from PCs for People, and Ina Montgomery from Urban Tech, which is been a kind of a long-standing commitment on the part of us as kind of volunteer members to work together to organize these meetings and make sure that we have an agenda and speakers. And if you are not currently a member, please feel free to join us. You can fill out the form on our website. It is free to join, and it will enable you to have access to a lot of the information that we share on a regular basis. These are all our socials and other media opportunities to keep in touch with what we're doing. So for today's agenda, I just want to give you a quick overview of it. We're going to have a quick new member introduction following the opportunity from any of you who are joining the meeting for the first time to say a quick hello. And then we're going to have a discussion today about a spectrum of the wireless broadband that was opened just about two and a half years ago. And both PCs for People here in Kansas City and probably 6 or 7 other cities are deploying it. But we're going to have a special set of guests from South Bend, Indiana, who are going to share with us how they're using the CBRS spectrum as well. Then following that, we'll have some community announcements and an opportunity for any of you who have some things to share with us. And so without any further ado, what I'd quickly like to first do is ask anyone who is joining this meeting for the first time, and Patrick, I'm going to start with you, to just say hello and let people know who you are, and if there's anyone else in the call who's joining this meeting for the first time. Just quick introduction.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Greetings from South Bend, Indiana. My name is Patrick, and I'm the Technology Equity Manager for the City of South Bend. So very excited to be with you all.
Fabulous. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for joining us. Anyone else on the call for the first time? Okay. Well, if not, then what I'd like to do is start the agenda by asking for our new member introduction. Is someone who I've known for a long time, actually, and that's Amy VanDeVelde from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA. Amy, you have the floor to let everybody know about you and the work you're doing with NTIA.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. So it's really great to be here. This is probably, I'd say, my eighth to 10th meeting. I did come to some of your all's meetings. Prior to joining NTIA, I live in St. Louis, and I've tried to get a coalition started in St. Louis unsuccessfully. And so sometimes I would join yours to talk about digital equity initiatives and things that were happening. Let me try to share my screen and see if this will work. Okay, can you see my slides? All right, so I am with NTIA. I think you all know I've done some updates on these calls. I've met most of you in person through my travels with NTIA, but I thought what would be interesting, I had never become a member. I didn't hear it till last time, your call to action to become a member. So I did that. And if my slides will advance. So just want to give you an overview of what NTIA actually is. So we are the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We are part of the Department of Commerce. And so NTIA advises on telecom policy issues. NTIA was created in the Carter administration. If you think back then, we didn't have internet, right? But it was about telecommunications. And our goal is to expand broadband access and adoption, which is everything that you hear about from me and my role, but also expanding the use of federal spectrum. So it's really interesting that we're going to have Patrick and Patrick, I think Denise used to be in Chicago maybe, and I met her at a net inclusion conference. So that's cool. And so federal spectrum. And so we're going to talk about this in the meeting and with people who know more about it than me, but spectrum is, and I had to look it up to make sure I gave you the right information, the radio frequencies that are part of the electromagnetic frequency spectrum used for telecommunications, and governed and licensed by the FCC and NTIA. So that's part of our role, not the department that I work in. And then also ensuring that the internet remains an engine for continued innovation and economic growth. So those of you who are involved in startups and think about things like AI, we just had a request for comment open about AI and the impacts to the business community and on privacy. We had a request for comment open until Monday on digital equity. So our agency is very thoughtful and intentional and wants to hear from you. And because I could be your federal program officer, the other person that might be your federal program officer is Melinda Stanley, since we straddle 2 states. But here's a little bit more information. I don't want to dominate too much time, but I added why we joined. It's to keep all of you informed about the federal initiatives to expand internet for all in Kansas and Missouri. And then the other thing about me in my past 10 years working at BJC Healthcare, running a national program to help digital newcomers learn to use the internet. My specialty areas are cybersecurity. In other words, helping digital newcomers understand how to implement personal cybersecurity and telemedicine. And of course, the program was focused on older adults. So in your work to try to expand internet for all, if you think about something and you have a question and think, well, how would someone have approached this? I might have done those things in my previous job, and I'm happy to help. Also did a lot of translation of materials, mostly into Spanish language, but also Korean and a couple of other languages. So if you're thinking about getting materials out, I've dealt with and done those things. And so the reason that I joined, and I'm encouraging Melinda Stanley to join, is just so that we can make sure you're involved in all stakeholder engagement. I think most of you are already aware, which is wonderful, but just keeping in touch with your broadband office, making sure that you go to stakeholder meetings, which I know most of you already come, invite other people that should be at the stakeholder meeting, so everybody's a part of this Internet for All initiative. And then as the program gets actually formally rolling and building programs, building infrastructure, having digital equity programs, staying in touch with the broadband office and your federal program officer about any fraud, waste, and abuse that you see, because we want to make these federal funds extend as far and wide as possible and connect all Kansans and Missourians. And so Here is contact information for myself if you're in Missouri, and Melinda Stanley if you're in Kansas. We do answer our phones. We live in your states, and the only thing we concern ourselves with is what's happening with our state. So that's me and NTIA in a nutshell, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Amy, thanks so much. That is super valuable information. And I want to make sure in working together with Wendy and the steering council, we get those slides from you to share back out with everyone. If you don't mind making sure we get those to Wendy.
Yep, I'll
Um,
send them right now to Wendy.
Super helpful.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. So let's, and you did a nice job setting the table for a couple of slides I'm about to share about the wireless spectrum, and in particular, a new segment that was opened up in October of 2020 by the FCC, which is going to be the subject of our discussion today, called the CBRS, the Citizens Broadband Radio Service Spectrum. So Wendy, if I can go ahead and share my screen, I'm going to get started on that part of the discussion. And please let me know if anyone's having trouble seeing what I'm sharing. So without getting into all of the fine print, as Amy was saying, so there's this wireless spectrum, and there's some narrow bands of it that are only used for certain applications. As you can see, the 2.4 megahertz unlicensed spectrum is just for wireless connections, homes, laptops, cell phones. It's really important, but it cannot interfere with other devices in the spectrum. So if you go more to your right and see the 5 megahertz unlicensed spectrum, much higher speeds available in that spectrum, but a significantly shorter range through which it can be broadcast. So you'll see those more in big organizations, highly organized and highly regulated. But where the overall wireless spectrum was not sufficient for most home broadband use became evident was at the start of the COVID pandemic, because kind of literally all of a sudden, millions of people were at home trying to get their kids through school, trying to get themselves through work, and do their normal internet entertainment, communication, doctor's visits, everything you do online, all at the same time. So it became necessary to open up a new spectrum, and that's right in the middle. That's this 3.5 megahertz Citizens Broadband Radio System Spectrum. It was created in October of 2020. So historically, that spectrum, the reason why it had never been used is because it was previously only reserved for military and government use, particularly Navy radar. So it was really only utilized on the East and the West Coast for submarines and military ports. And so it was opened up in 2020 with this kind of tiered access. And I don't want to get too hung up on the details, but it's important that you all understand the background of how this came to be. So now that it was opened up, there's still 3 levels of access to CBRS. The military usage is still restricted. Those are the incumbent users. And then there was a new section of it opened up for priority access licenses. Those are auctioned at the county level, and those are usually larger organizations, businesses, municipal and state government organizations that work with some of the for-profit providers to get PAL licenses. And then what PCs for People got was called a GAA, a General Authorized Access License. So broadcasting through this spectrum, we are required to pay a fee of a little over $2 per user for access to that spectrum. But for most nonprofits and smaller businesses, we can afford that by still offering a price point that makes it easier for the the middle and lower classes from an economic perspective to be able to have access to internet in that spectrum. A few more technical things. We started out with 4G. We're now moving to 5G LTE. And what it allows for is you can mix different urban signals, but it penetrates more easily than some of the other spectrums. And it's basically it's a signal that operates through a receiver, and then it's transmitted into standard Wi-Fi. And I'll show you what it looks like and how we got into it. So it starts with you have to have a base level of fiber connectivity. So in some places around the country, like Cleveland, PCs for People actually got a spot and they actually have buildings. They have one in downtown Kansas City. It's an internet hotel, and it's where most of the providers will have their equipment to basically have a connection to the overall national wireless broadband kind of backbone. And we have a wired connection that's required. In Kansas City, we do have the good fortune, thanks to Google Fiber from 10 years ago and all the competition that brought, we have fiber infrastructure pretty much over the entire city and the greater metro area. So, but there's a lot of available space in that conduit that has that fiber. And in some cases, Google Fiber has actually provided free access to their fiber that they run to different low-income communities and neighborhoods. So once we have that fiber connection, which is a wired connection, we're able to put up towers that convert that signal to a 4G LTE signal that we broadcast from either the rooftop or wherever we can locate the tower on a high building. And then that goes through the community and gets picked up by users who have a home modem. And so that's what we provide to the low-income communities we serve. We provide a device that connects directly with the signal coming off of all the towers that we put up. The CPE, the customer premise equipment that we provide, that's a kind of an industry acronym for the modem. We either mail them or we provide them in person to the customer. They just plug them in and it automatically connects with the signal coming from the tower in their area. And it's usually about a half-mile radius that the signal coming from the tower connects. So it really makes it more cost effective. And that's why small businesses and nonprofits are the ones that are working with local fiber providers and local municipal governments to, ever since this time period, October of 2020, because it's become a good gap filler for those areas that have not been able to get home enrollments for standard commercial internet programs, because usually they're cost prohibitive. So the last slide here is the way PCs for People has gone about deploying this strategy. This particular map shows where the heaviest concentration of mobile Wi-Fi hotspot devices has been. And we've been providing Wi-Fi hotspot devices to low-income families throughout the country for about 7.5 years now. And so wherever we see clusters of users of Wi-Fi hotspot devices, that's where we've been focusing our effort. And we're continuing to focus our effort and energy and attention on putting up towers that can broadcast over the CBRS spectrum, because it provides a supplement to wherever mobile Wi-Fi hotspot users are currently operating. I just want to show you one other thing that's going to require me to just access one other set of slides. And then I want to give the floor over to our friends from South Bend so they can share. Let's see, where is my next thing I want to share? Well, I'm gonna leave it at that, because my other set of slides is really something I can just talk to instead. So the last thing I'll say is that I think when it comes to the work that we're trying to do, and as technical as those slides were, the basis around it is to take advantage of the opportunities that the federal government, in the form of the FCC and the NTIA, have made available in recognition of the fact that there wasn't sufficiency of a broadband spectrum to serve the needs of all families throughout the country when it comes to, not just having internet, but it had to be at sufficient speed and a sufficient capacity to allow entire families to utilize the internet without interruption as they do more and more remote work from home. So I'll leave my comments off there, and I'm going to hand over to Patrick so he can share a little bit more specifics about what's going on in South Bend, Indiana, what we can learn from them, and how we can share learnings to make this something that's more widely known and hopefully more widely applied throughout the country. So Patrick, I will now hand over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. And also just wanted to say that you did such a great job of overviewing what CBRS is and how Spectrum works, and a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today, you mentioned so elegantly. So thank you so much for that kind of overview. I know it's a lot to digest for people too. So if this is your first time hearing about it, it takes some time perhaps to make sure you kind of know what's going on. But I appreciate the intro, Tom. So yeah, I can go ahead and share some slides, and then would love to talk about what we've been up to in South Bend. Can folks see this all right?
Looks good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, again, very excited to talk about our CBRS project in South Bend, and a little bit of, the lessons that we've learned, things that we've, some challenges, adjustments, and then the successes and things we're able to do with the network right now. And I wanted to shout out Madi Rogers, who's our Director of Civic Innovation. I know she will hopefully be joining. And then Denise Riedl, our Chief Innovation Officer, is also on the call today. So I've put a few of our contact information at the end of the slides, and I know that we're excited to talk about this project and others in South Bend. So please don't hesitate to reach out as we can be helpful. But just to quickly give a little bit of an overview about our team and our department, our innovation and technology department that Denise leads and that Madi and I are situated in the civic innovation team, we have a really unique opportunity to serve residents by enhancing city services. So we're kind of the IT arm of the city, and we also enhance city services with data and business analytics and kind of process mapping. And then we also work with partners to provide services directly to residents through kind of digital divide initiatives. We have some that I'll talk about today, providing connectivity to students especially. And we also work to democratize technology and data access. And then we support community organizations additionally through things like outreach and additional kind of resources for community support. I did want to shout out our Medium blog, where it's linked. I'll be sure to send out these slides, but to give you kind of a taste of the many different projects we work on and the different partners that we love to collaborate with, we do kind of highlight some of our project stories on this blog, and I'd encourage folks to take a look. And then also, I always love to highlight our team motto, which is to listen first and build with, which I think this project's a great example of using what we're hearing from the community and continuing to build with the community and with our partners and make it a very collaborative building process. So I'd love to talk about one of those very specific collaborations, which is kind of what gave rise to our private LTE collaboration, which is Citywide Classroom. So in 2020, the ACS showed that about 24% of families in South Bend didn't have internet, and then 11% of the families that did have internet relied exclusively on mobile data. Tom, this was something that you had mentioned too, that especially when classes went online, we saw a really critical and urgent need to get students and families connected. So Citywide Classroom, which was a partnership between us at the city and Focus, which is a local nonprofit, and then the South Bend Community School Corporation we distributed LTE traditional mobile hotspots to provide a meaningful connection in that really critical time. And we had a real strong impact, especially in that really urgent period of online learning. But then also as families, as students were going back to in-person learning, we saw the need for continued connectivity in the community. So, just the things that were contributing to the digital divide before the pandemic were exacerbated. And we saw that a lot more activities and aspects of daily life moved online. As you were saying, Tom, that we had, more doctor's visits, jobs required online activities, social services. So we saw that students were still needing to do work online, but then also their families really had a quality of life benefit from having this connectivity. So since 2020, Citywide Classroom has connected over 5,000 students, and we were able to provide those connections using CARES funding. So this was something that wasn't a real burden on the school's budget, and we had significant funding for. With that funding running out this past year, we started a partnership with T-Mobile's Project 10 Million, which, if folks aren't familiar with, they provide 100 gigabytes of data per year through their LTE kind of traditional mobile hotspots, and some 5G hotspots as well that you can pay for. But that was a way for us to provide some form of connectivity without the additional grant funding. But what we've also seen is that families need a lot more than 100 gigabytes more often than not. So we've had this free option, which is a great baseline for a lot of families, but we also see the need for continued connectivity resources and enhanced connectivity resources. And that's where we've seen CBRS and private LTE come in as a real potential resource for that. So as I was mentioning, we saw that the T-Mobile hotspots were meeting a great need. They were providing a strong baseline for families that needed some form of connectivity. But we also were looking for something that would give unlimited data capacity to students, something that we could see lower recurring costs on, and that could provide stronger connections for families. And we were also interested in, investing one-time grant funding into a longer-term solution. So if we could purchase infrastructure that could create a network that like our partners at the South Bend Community Schools and us in support of that could build their own network that would have lower recurring costs over the long run, that would be a phenomenal resource. And then the city could also support that for public Wi-Fi, for smart city use cases, especially in areas that a fiber installation wouldn't be feasible in. So this is this was kind of a great idea that we didn't really know how to bring it into existence. But then, as you had mentioned, Tom, in 2017 and then in 2020, when it rolled out, we were very lucky that CBRS became this option for people like us and our partners in the South Bend schools who didn't have the ability to purchase a spectrum license that could cost billions of dollars, or didn't have the license to begin with. We would have the necessary airwaves to create our own LTE network, similar to what we'd see from T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, but that would be really targeted to our use cases. And again, those being connecting families, low-income families for our school corporation, and piloting some smart city solutions for the city of South Bend. So we were really interested in this new innovation, but I really have to give a huge shout out to our partners at Notre Dame's Wireless Institute. We are very, very fortunate that we have a world-class. We have a lot of world-class research partners in the faculty at the Wireless Institute who brought this innovation to our attention. They guided us through every step of the process. They are the ones who explained to me what Spectrum was and how it works. So throughout this entire project, they have just been a phenomenal resource, and they're kind of the ones who connected the dots for us that this could be a great avenue for to solve our connectivity needs. And one thing I will just mention, which I know you'd said as well, Tom, is just that I know some people are concerned about if this is a network that is very accessible, what's to stop anyone from just getting on it? And one thing I'll mention too is that all of our devices have an authorized SIM that is kind of the key, the password that they have to have in order to get onto the network. So that's nice.
That's
privacy.
a good point. And
Yeah.
I'll back up to my comments, because we're primarily, Patrick, in the Kansas City area, deploying this in housing authority properties, a lot of high-rise MDUs, and the benefit we tell the residents is that they have their own unique network. It's the downside, if you will, and it's really not a downside, is they just have to know that they have to identify the network and they have to input their own unique password. But and they may, live right next door to another apartment, but that apartment has its own modem and it has its own unique network, and those are private networks. And so it's something that we've tried to use as an advantage from a privacy perspective, even though obviously from a regulatory perspective, it's necessary and it's required.
No, and that's a great point as well. So to get into a bit of the specifics about our network, we did really a collaborative, we approached this really as a collaborative partnership, and it was led by the South Bend Community School Corporation. Again, as they received, they had a lot of this grant funding to connect families, and we saw the primary use case as connecting their students and families. So the network would be owned and managed and operated by the school corporation, but then it was a strong collaboration between the city, Focus, as I mentioned previously, an innovation nonprofit in South Bend, as well as our research partners from Notre Dame, our dark fiber network in the region, Choice Light, who I'll mention in a bit. Really a lot of people coming together to make this project happen. And we had a vendor review, and we ended up selecting Motorola Solutions. I linked some of their kind of case studies and their homepage for their Nitro private LTE solution. And then we also received 1,000 Cradlepoint R500 routers. So this is, as you mentioned, Tom, kind of these devices that take in the LTE signal and then spit out a Wi-Fi signal for families to use, which we were very grateful to and excited to get that grant from the FCC.
That's a really innovative use, and I'm going to ask you in a little bit about E-rate fiber to libraries and schools, and in particular, libraries were big recipients of those ECF grant funds a year ago, and I know a lot of libraries have used them for hotspots and tablets, but this is the first time I've heard of ECF funds being used for routers for these modems, and I think I'm really interested in learning more about that.
Absolutely, and I would love to have. I know there's definitely some intricacies around the E-rate funding that I'm sure we can get into as well. But for ECF, this was a great opportunity.
Yeah, very cool.
And then, so this is just a fun photo of one of our rooftop sites. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about.
That looks like one of our teams.
But we had a fun drone photo shoot, so we got to use those whenever we can.
I've never realized how intimate I would become with cinder blocks.
Yes.
Since I started helping the teams put up these towers.
It's so funny that when you see these on towers, they seem so small. It's like a traffic light, and then when you see it in person, they're massive.
Yeah.
But to go into our network design, we initially had planned for three sites, 1 rooftop and 2 towers. One thing I'll get into in our recommendations is using the resources and assets that you have that you don't have to pay for or do any additional engineering on. So we were using, with the schools being the main partner, some school sites that would reduce some recurring costs, and then one partner tower from a local company that was giving a good deal on their site. And then the dark fiber, as you had mentioned again, Tom, which we need to power the backhaul for the site, was provided by our local nonprofit dark fiber provider, which is called ChoiceLight. And I provided a link to their website. And then we were initially planning for 9 CBSDs, which are the radios, and 18 antennas to serve 1,000 families throughout this. Really, this is most of South Bend. I realize I'm a lot more familiar probably than most folks with the geography of South Bend, but this is almost all of our city limits. And a key thing I'll just highlight is that these were our coverage projections provided by Motorola initially. And as I'll scroll to the next slide, we did see significantly tighter coverage than we expected. So this pink is what we saw in our first drive tests. And then the green is what we were expecting from what Motorola had shown us initially. And I share this just to be, fully transparent and to share that there have been some challenges and adjustments that we've navigated through CBRS. I do think also that it's a good reminder that this is very new and that people are still figuring these things out. So one thing that we have learned is that foliage is a really big factor for CBRS. So for some of the models, increasing tree cover decreases coverage dramatically. So that's one aspect of the reality versus expectations that we think contributed to the difference. And then also just that these models, it's a new kind of band of spectrum that's being tested, and it's a new use case. So some of these, models are being calibrated over time. So this is something that was obviously concerning when we realized that our coverage was a lot tighter than we were expecting. But we had some solutions up our sleeve that we were able to work on with our partners. And one of those was reconfiguring and reoptimizing our network based on density. So this is another thing you mentioned, Tom, which was we initially, if you look at this this map, we really didn't think that we were going to have to put the tower sites in the densest areas because it was going to reach almost the whole city. But then once we knew that we were dealing with a tighter radius, we knew that we had to target the neighborhoods that would be best served by a smaller coverage area. So we ended up moving, as you see this lowest tower, really these darker areas represent denser populations of low-income families. And we realized that this southernmost tower was not really serving the population that we needed to serve. So we ended up working with Motorola, the school corporation, and our partners in the city and nFocus moved the southern tower to our west side, which is one of the sees South Bend's highest density of low-income families. And we have some additional sites, as you can see in the second map, that we have one up and running and then another one installations underway. So that's been kind of a key change for us, is refocusing on density rather than citywide coverage.
It's been an important shift we've had to make too, Patrick. I mean, not only because it kind of optimizes the usage and but it is kind of an ROI decision. I mean, we're spending a lot of money, and a lot of it is grant funded, but we got to make sure that the money we spend results in families adopting it and using it as quickly as possible. So the slides that I was trying to find, but I decided not to, it describes the shift that you're talking about, so that it's a balance between MDUs and then just broadcast areas. Because with the MDUs, it's also more sorry to be so mercenary, it's more cost effective for our labor to be able to meet with the residents and get them to understand what it is and get them to enroll. as opposed to a lot of the neighborhoods, you're just going door to door and making sure people are aware of it, which we're going to do both, but we have to do both. And we affect a greater percentage of the population in need more quickly by having this strategy where you focus on the densest populations, which tend to be for us in these high-rise towers. And oftentimes we're finding the more we focus on MDUs, and then we also get the rooftop access to the towers. There are a lot of low-income neighborhoods and single-family homes and multiplexes that are in proximity to the MDUs, and so we can really much more easily kind of do both at the same time. And it's fascinating to hear your story. And I know I'm jumping ahead, but I do want to make sure I get your slides, and I want to make sure I introduce you to kind of the team that is kind of running this work for PC for People, mostly out of our Cleveland office. We've got an enormous contract to do all of East Cleveland. And I think even the work they're doing there, which has been informed by what I was sharing over the past 3 or 4 years, they could learn a lot from what you're doing, and I think vice versa. So sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure I get your slides, not only for our purposes, but we want to share them out with any of the coalition members who would like to get them as well.
Well, I very much appreciate that and would love to learn more. That's one of my recommendations, is that I know that everyone is learning as they do this, and would love to keep learning from others as well. And one thing I'll just mention too, I know I as I'm reading through the slides, and I often will say we, just because this has been such a collaborative partnership, but just to mention again that this is a project that is owned and operated by our school corporation, but the city continuing to offer project management support and having the smart city use cases. It's certainly a partnership that we are in a supporting role on, but I know I keep saying we, so I just want to make sure I clarify that.
I'm so glad and it's a great role model. I mean, Kansas City is facing a huge opportunity. If we could get our city and our school districts, not just the Kansas City public schools, but we have a really strong network of charters and probably 10 or 12 other districts outside of just the Kansas City, Missouri proper, that we could all learn some great lessons from this, and it's a powerful example. So yeah, I appreciate the fact you're referring to yourselves as we, because it speaks to how powerful this collaboration can be.
Well, thank you. And Denise, I see you have your hand raised.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention to this group was that with the city and the schools in South Bend also set up a network sharing agreement with the private LTE network. And there have been a couple of communities that have asked us about that model and like how we structured that agreement for kind of two anchors sharing it. And so if that's of interest, or if you hear other cities that are interested, we're always happy to share that.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Denise. Yeah, and shout out too because we heard about one of these agreements from San Antonio, and we made ours, and then we would love to continue to pass on the knowledge sharing. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Denise. Yeah, and so I'll just just to one other point on our network kind of re-optimization. We also have been piloting. So as I go back to these cradle point antennas, they're stronger than what's on your phone, but they're weaker than some higher gain antennas. So we are piloting some window mounted suction cup higher DBIs, like higher power antennas, that are going to hopefully expand the coverage radius by about 30%. So that's something that we're also looking at. And then hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have our reconfigured sites up and running, and we'll be able to reach, we estimate, about 2,200 students, which is, if we were to give out those 1,000 devices, we'd still be reaching, our original goal was to connect 500 cradle points to the network at this phase. So I think we're still in a great place for this pilot, but just to give some context to what we've learned and how we've adjusted. Right. And at this time too, we've also been distributing the devices already. So we began in November while our main tower sites were up and running, and we were doing some additional reconfiguration. We started distributing to students in that coverage area, and we've distributed over 200 routers thus far. And we're using the partnership citywide classroom that I mentioned previously. We're delivering these Cradlepoint routers to families that already have a T-Mobile hotspot. So we know that they have a need, and we've been able to connect with them previously. And now we're kind of leveraging those connections for additional outreach. Here's an example on the right of one of our little setup guides. It's a quick installation, but just making sure that families know, A, how to use the router, and then B, that they know that they can contact us if they have any issues. And they often do. So we have a great kind of community relationship there. And we also have already seen really, I would say, enthusiastic use of the network. So we've had over half of the people that we've delivered a device to have been using the device. And then we've also seen 40 terabytes of data already used on the network. And what's really significant about that is there's a significant chunk of families, I wrote about a third, that if they were using their T-Mobile hotspot, they would already be out of data for the year. And this is over the period of a few months. So this really does show again that these families are getting an additional resource that is very much needed, especially in the post-pandemic online world. So one other thing I'll just mention too is that we have seen speeds. We have a kind of remote speed test option, and with strong signal strength, we've seen about 70 down, 25 up speeds, which is much better than we expect on some of the traditional LTE hotspots. So I'm curious, Tom, how that's what you guys have seen, but we've been impressed there.
Our kind of baseline is 50-10, but we've seen the equipment keeps getting better, and the signal strength based on our deployment strategy is getting more strategic. So it's the average is creeping up to around 60-20. And so it's encouraging to see what you're seeing too, because it really is. I mean, it's we have to learn as we go and keep making improvements as we go. And it sounds like you guys are doing the same thing.
Absolutely. And I also, one thing I'll mention as well, just is very close, I know, to my heart and to Denise's heart, is that we're also trying to build, more robust technologies like fiber in a lot of the neighborhoods that we're trying to serve. So we're, currently pursuing a lot of infrastructure grant money and really trying to invest a lot in communities that we're serving with this network. And with that as well, we're constantly promoting the Affordable Connectivity Program via Citywide Classroom. So I know that we do see this private LTE network as a kind of more long-term solution than kind of the LTE hotspots, but we also, are promoting and working towards even more permanent solutions in the kind of while we do this as well.
Right.
And then a few things I'd love to highlight are kind of, especially from the city's perspective, things that we're looking forward to in addition to the primary student use case. So I put a little link in a plug for the slides, but that we are currently expanding our public Wi-Fi network, which is called South Bend Open Wi-Fi. It's on pace to be tripled in a 2-year period, from about 50 access points to 150 by the end of this year. And what's been really exciting is there are a few locations. One in particular, an example is kind of a temporary housing shelter that might not be feasible for a permanent fiber installation, but that we might be able to kind of quickly use the private LTE network to get public Wi-Fi up and running. Now, if you see if we go back to the map that shows the limited coverage radius, that's a little concerning as to like how widely used the public Wi-Fi could be around the city. But we've actually had some promising projections using very high powered antennas. So these ones, as you see on the slide, can pull in a much broader signal. And these ones do have to be registered. It's kind of getting in the weeds of CBRS, but you have to register this with the SaaS provider. So there's a little bit of little bit of intricacies, but what's great about this use case is for families, we don't want to have to do a permanent outdoor installation, and they may not own their home, they may not want people in their home, we may not have the bandwidth. But for a public use, kind of a more commonly used area by a lot of people, we can use a fixed high-powered antenna like this and bring in a signal. What we expect is throughout much of the city. So that's a use case we're really looking forward to. And then also, we are really excited to start piloting some smart city devices on the network. So right now we're exploring some potential environmental sensors that we're looking at. A lot of those work on, Ethernet, maybe Wi-Fi or LTE. And I think we're going to use a combination for sure at the starting point to see how does it perform, kind of what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks. But we're really excited to start putting some of these IoT sensors like temperature, air quality, noise on the LTE network and see how that does.
Very cool.
And then I wanted to put together, I know for this community, especially as some folks who might be thinking about, what does our team, what do the schools wish we had known perhaps, or wish we had thought about before we pursued a solution like this. And I think the biggest one is that the kind of experience and expertise being so critical, and that we really benefited from our partners in Notre Dame, both on the academic side and then also even on some practical side, had tried out some CBRS deployments just on campus. So having some of that background knowledge was so helpful. And then also we've talked with, we're members of US Ignite, and they have a community of people who are trying CBRS use cases. And we've learned so much just from the other cities and communities that are trying this. So as Denise mentioned with us sharing like our network sharing agreement with the schools, we are always eager to talk to people about how things are going and what we can share and what they might be interested in learning. Also, just this point about focusing on density. I know for a lot of families or a lot of communities as well, they may have more rural use cases, and this might not apply to everyone. But for cities like South Bend, cities like Kansas City, I do think focusing on density makes sense, as we kind of talked about, Tom. And then also like having a combination of a density approach with something like the high-powered antennas that for specific needs can bring in a very broad signal. Also wanted to shout out leveraging your assets. So we are very lucky that we have some very tall school buildings in South Bend. So some of those rooftop sites are 3 or 4 stories, which give us great coverage. And then we already have fiber there. It reduces the cost of leasing a tower, things like that. And then also dark fiber, our dark fiber partner has been a great asset in South Bend as well. And then just to really approach, I think we've really benefited from approaching this solution as a pilot, especially from the community perspective, that we're trying something new. There's going to be things that we learn and that we have to adjust to, and making sure that we, start relatively small, but then have the potential to build in the future. And so there are ways that we've thought about, if there are new locations that we want to connect or new use cases, but making sure to expect the unexpected is I think a valuable thing. And then I did just want to share, as I'd mentioned, share my email and then also Maddie's email. And I'm sure Denise would also be happy to be in touch as well, but just wanted to make sure that people had a contact that they could reach out to for any questions on this.
That is fabulous. Patrick, first of all, I've got to commend you and Maddie and Denise. You're fabulous representatives of South Bend, just as a place, first and foremost. And the fact that you shared this in such a impactful and digestible way. It's really inspiring. And like I said, I know for sure I'm going to use it to share with my PCs for People colleagues, and along with Wendy and the Kansas City Public Library and the rest of the Kansas City Coalition for Digital Inclusion. We want to make this available to all of our members and stakeholders as well. Here's what I'd like to do, and for those of you who do have questions for Patrick and Madi and Denise, feel free to use the chat function. But before I go to your questions as part of the discussion, I want to just quickly go on our agenda to Marlene Nagel, and Marlene's with our. We have a regional government planning office, the Mid-America Regional Council, and I want to give Marlene a chance not only to make a community announcement, but also to share with you, Patrick and Madi and Denise, just her own perspectives on what we've just listened to and how it relates to some of the work that the Mid-America Regional Council is trying to help coalesce around in the Kansas City region. So Marlene, let me hand over to you real quickly.
Thanks, Tom. Well, I was asked to just make a brief announcement about the COVID-19, the Regional Response and Recovery Fund that where foundations and other contributors raised a considerable sum of dollars to support families and individuals affected by the pandemic, and either from a health or an economic standpoint. And it operated pretty much starting in March of 2020 until just recently with a last set of investments. There was an advisory board that oversaw the use of the funds, and through their work gave out over 400 grants to numerous community organizations serving the bi-state area. The last awards had to do with digital equity, and 26 grants were awarded. The advisory board was able to find some additional funds. So about $800,000 worth of grants were awarded to those 26 organizations for three things. One was to promote and support the ACP outreach, encouraging residents who might qualify and need the support to with assistance to enroll. Second, to help households that didn't have devices in their home or didn't have adequate devices to be in a position to obtain them or have access to them. And then third, a lot of the organizations funded focused on training with basic and workforce related skills. And the emphasis was on serving adults and households, serving special populations that may have more challenges or access to fewer resources, including immigrants and non-English speakers. There were 3 organizations funded to serve folks in Miami County, which tends to be able to receive much in the way of resources. And then there were 3 organizations that are providing services to seniors in the Northland. And so the advisory board was pleased to be able to provide those resources. We've couple other quick things. We were able to work with the 2 state broadband offices. We helped to host some meetings a couple weeks ago on the Kansas side, and there's a meeting coming up June 2nd in the morning for the Missouri broadband office here in Kansas City. We're hosting it in our office downtown, which does have free parking. And I believe Wendy sent out the information to this group. And they have a survey that the state is hoping more people will fill out through next week. I just finally, I was really impressed by the work that the folks in South Bend have done. I think we are always looking for low-cost ways to serve communities so that not only the infrastructure to be installed, but the way in which households with limited incomes could take advantage of the technology. And so I think it's just another great example of how that could be deployed in portions of our metro area in partnership with groups like schools.
Great. Marlene, thank you. And what I'd like to do before I open up the floor for other community announcements, I want to make sure that all of you on the call, if you have any questions you'd like to discuss openly with Patrick or Denise and Madi from South Bend, or with Amy VanDeVelde from the NTIA. And Amy, I can't thank you enough, because I think your comments set the table really nicely for the discussion we had with South Bend. But just real quickly, so any questions other than, and I know there's a couple that are in the chat, but I want to make sure that we open up the floor for a couple of minutes if anyone wants to directly direct any questions to either the South Bend folks or to Amy. Anybody want to jump in?
And my colleague Melinda Stanley is also here from Kansas. So there's
Oh,
somebody
good.
from
Hey, Melinda.
Kansas that wants to ask Melinda a question. She's here too.
Oh, and in fact, I'd love to just ask Melinda to say hi. And for those of you on the call who haven't had a chance to meet her yet, if you don't mind, I hate to put you on the spot like that, Melinda, but love for you to just say hello and make sure everybody knows the role you're playing in Kansas.
You bet. Well, thank you. And thanks, Amy. As Amy mentioned earlier, our roles are state specific, and I am excited to be serving here in Kansas. So very similarly, I have a deep digital literacy background. Prior to this role, I was actually at the broadband office helping to stand up and operationalize programs. A lot of my experience in the digital literacy space came from roles in education over the years. I served as the state's ed tech director, and for you Missouri folks that know of the eMents program, we did a similar program here in Kansas called Tech Rich Classrooms. So our roles, as Amy mentioned, are really to support the broadband offices and engage with all of you. So appreciate the opportunity, Tom.
Great. Thanks, Melinda. And you brought up something that is prompting a question that I have back to Patrick and Madi and Denise. And you guys need to know, through the work that was actually sponsored in a large part by the Mid-America Regional Council and coordinated largely by Marlene, we've done a lot of assessing and evaluating what has come to be called the meaningful use cases for internet adoption, and it has prompted I think greater engagement on the part of schools and libraries in particular, and organizations that really focus on the learning and the training and the kind of all the digital skills side of things. And outside of the partnership with the South Bend schools, I'm curious to know if you've got other organizations who are focusing more on kind of the digital equity training and learning side of things, in addition to just the adoption side.
No, absolutely. That is a great question, and one that I think we in the city we're trying to find our place in supporting organizations that are doing that work. I think we have some really phenomenal organizations that are providing digital literacy training and digital skills training, especially our library. So we are close partners with the library, and we're looking for ways that we can support the work that they're doing. One really exciting kind of pilot that we're doing to support their digital skills training is actually working with, so they're doing trainings kind of like almost satellite trainings. So they have trainings at their main library locations, but they're also doing trainings now at local nonprofits. And one of those is our local immigration advocacy organization, which predominantly serves the immigrant and Hispanic population of South Bend. And when they complete a full, slate of courses on digital skills, we are partnering to donate a refurbished either desktop station or a refurbished laptop to those participants. So that's kind of a smaller example right now of ways that we're trying to see as a city how we can support organizations doing the work, but also recognizing that in some ways we don't want to either duplicate or step on the efforts of organizations that are doing a great job with digital skills. So I think we're figuring that out a little bit, but we're really excited about this partnership for that device donation for One Piece.
Terrific. So you mentioned refurbished devices. May perhaps selfishly, I'm asking is, do you have refurbishers that you work with? You know, where are you sourcing devices that are reliable but also affordable for the community?
Yeah, we actually, so some of the devices are from PCs for People. So that was, we have some.
We didn't pre-script that, guys. This is literally, I didn't realize that was going on.
So these are some that we had left over from a previous kind of donation drive.
Yeah.
And it kind of, to be honest, we're still figuring out, we do love the idea of, you know, having some computers that are either donated to us, and then we work with, like, we have some technical schools and some high school students that might be interested in refurbishing. And I think we're definitely interested in keeping that kind of local sustainable ecosystem, but I think we also would love to bring in additional partners on that. And one partner that we do have as well is the University of Notre Dame. They have a surplus store that basically any of their tech that is either obsolete or isn't covered by like a leasing agreement, they sell it to nonprofits in the community for very low cost. So that's how we've got some of the equipment as well.
Well, just so you know, Ina Montgomery, one of our steering council, one of my colleagues, asked me just a couple of days ago, because she has a colleague who was looking to get a Windows operating system license onto some devices. And so what I told her is I'll share with you guys, because PCs for People is also the largest MAR, Microsoft authorized refurbisher and distributor of Microsoft licenses for nonprofits. So so we can help set up, you know, anyone that you're working with, particularly if it's, you know, schools with, you know, tech training that they're doing with high school and college age kids. It's important that they get the proper licensing to get operating systems. And so PCs for People does also act as a distributor of those discounted operating system licenses. So we'd be happy to help you out with that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you mentioning that, Tom.
Yeah. So I'm going to open the floor up now. I know in the chat, Leslie, you put a community announcement. So if you want to talk a little bit more about that, and anyone else, just for a few minutes here, we like to do a roundtable among the members. If anyone has a community announcement they'd like to share.
Yeah, I just have a couple. First, the next Friday, we're doing the next workshop in the Digital Equity Activist Series that Tony Lupino has been leading through the Digital Equity Working Group at UMKC. So there is both an in-person and a virtual option for that, but in-person bonus is you get delicious pastries and coffee. The second is just a reminder to, I think Marlene mentioned the survey that the UM system released in partnership with the Office of Broadband Development. And so that link is there, and they are just hoping that they can get more responses. So if you can help spread the word on that, they would appreciate it.
Thank you, Leslie. And I do want to circle back, Marlene, you mentioned the meeting on June 2nd. Is there anything additional you can share with the group about that meeting? Is that something that you would like to have, you know, broad public participation in, or how do you want to manage the way we promote that meeting?
So the state provided us with an agenda, and they said they're doing these sessions to focus on their digital equity plan. There's not a lot of time on the agenda, frankly, for that.
Yeah.
And when I asked, they said they were just sort of going to be introducing the way in which they're going to do their work to prepare their digital equity plan. But I think having engagement from folks who want to make sure that the Kansas City area is both strengths and needs are expressed in that state plan. I think it'd be helpful to attend that meeting if possible.
Right. And that actually directs, it prompts me to direct another question back, Patrick, to you and Denise and Madi. I don't know which one of you might be best equipped to want to answer it, but the degree to which the Federal Infrastructure Act funding is coming through the states and has prompted, every state to have its own broadband office and is in the process of determining how to allocate that funding to the regions throughout each state. To what extent is the project that you guys are working on contributing toward what will ultimately be some kind of a submission or application on the part of the greater South Bend region when it comes to getting some of that state funding? How are you guys, how might you characterize what's going on in the South Bend area with regard to that upcoming funding?
Denise, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, I'll speak on that, and I'll let Madi and Patrick, you guys chime in as well. So Madi and Patrick, they lead the connectivity coalition that was created by the mayor this past year, which is very similar, very inspired by a lot of the great stuff that Kansas City has homegrown in terms of the collaborative culture you guys have around digital equity across different sectors and across different organizations. Right now, we're very much in the phase of taking inventory of what our region needs and what we have and what our gaps are, simply because we have a great relationship with our state broadband officer. And in fact, the former chief of fire in the city of South Bend is now the head of infrastructure at the state. So I'm hoping that gives us a little bit of a leg up there, but one can hope. The issue though, the state's a little bit behind on their planning. They haven't really started engaging with communities yet. And we keep, our finger on it, make sure they know, they're welcome to come. We want to be ready to engage. We want to have really specific asks and really data informed and community informed asks. And so we're like Patrick and Madi are doing lots of projects now, like taking inventory of like all of the digital inclusion programs that are in our region now and which audiences they serve and which ones they don't, right? Like, is our big gap for Spanish language learners, specifically digital equity classes for seniors, those are the things we're trying to figure out in addition to collecting all this great data on speed tests and access and surveying residents. And so we're very much in a data collection asset phase right now while we sit and wait for the plan to come out, because we really don't know exactly what's going to be eligible, what the state of Indiana is going to say. And again, they seem very collaborative and they have been a good partner so far. So we're hoping they can, listen and work with us to help craft that plan. We have every reason to be optimistic, but we don't know what's going to be an eligible spend yet for BEAD and DE.
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much, Denise. And it's a fly the plane as you build it type of exercise. As much as we appreciate the reputation Kansas City has earned for doing this work for many, many years. I mean, when it comes to funding, typically each of us represent in our own organizations, we typically request funds that are particular to each of our needs as an organization. So what we've been going through lately, and honestly it has been extremely encouraged and through the facilitation of Marlene and MARC, we have we're blessed with a very strong regional government planning office that has experience with federal funding that needs to get kind of impartially managed and shepherded across a wide range of stakeholders. And we're moving forward, I think, as you said, Denise, optimistically with how the collaborative nature of our work is going to start to manifest itself in the way we present our case to the state office. And it is important that you have good relationships. That's why, we're lucky to have Melinda and Amy as kind of coaches and helpers and with regard to what's coming from the federal side. But we've worked really hard to stay close with their colleagues at the state broadband office, which in most states, those offices have just been formed over the past few months. And so, we all have to work together to make sure that happens. And it's just kind of cool to be able to share some benchmarks. And one thing I made a note as you were talking, Denise, we're going to share a report that Marlene shared with us based on, it reflects many months of work that we've done over the past year. Taking inventory, as you said, really assessing things. And it might be helpful for you to take a look at least what that report looks like and how we're using that as a prompt to prepare ourselves for these final kind of submissions for that regional funding. It's a window of opportunity that I don't think any of us have ever seen before, and we need to benefit from whatever learning we can share from each other. So having you guys involved in this call is really super helpful.
One other thing I'll add too, which I think is something that digital equity professionals shouldn't forget in this specific era of American Rescue. It might be different in Kansas City, but as a small city in South Bend, because we're small, the city government's small, and Madi and Patrick are like these amazing Swiss Army knife people that have their influence in so many projects. We see these interesting overlaps between the sustainability funds with American Rescue, with the public safety money that's coming in that the city is received. And I think what's really interesting is across a lot of different American Rescue and infrastructure bill funds that are coming in from all sorts of agencies, a lot of them involve technology in homes, right? And so whether that's, sustainability related, things like sensors in homes for water use and temperature and kind of management, whether it's, cameras or public safety equipment for neighborhoods and homes. There's a lot of the projects that I think are getting evangelized right now across the country involve and sort of presuppose that there is access in homes. And so that's something I think our community can really use to our advantage. Not only because we're doing the foundational work that makes all that possible, but also because there's potentially even other buckets of money that we can use collaboratively with like peers in our city, like whether it's a sustainability office or kind of a public safety nonprofit or something, or business venture, small business support team. We're finding more and more of those opportunities. And I feel like that's also something to keep in mind, because that I think we're just starting to understand what that world looks like. And it's a very promising component of the fact that not only so much investment is happening in our work, but also in just public work generally in cities.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as you were speaking, Denise, I just want to make sure for those of you who haven't checked the chat window, lots of helpful links. It's great, Patrick, seeing the roadmap that you guys are working off of in South Bend. And I know Marlene posted a link to the MARC site, which has our regional plan in it as well. So please take advantage of that. And there's only a couple minutes left for others to speak up, either with questions or announcements they'd like to make, or just newsworthy tidbits to share with the group. Anybody? Yeah, like I said, there's some really helpful links in the chat. So I don't want to prolong our time. I do want to thank you, Denise, and Patrick and Madi for joining us on this call, and Melinda, you as well. I hope both you and Amy can continue to attend our meetings. They're going to be an array of different topics. We're really grateful to Kansas City Digital Drive for playing a much more intensified role in helping us with planning our agendas and getting our speakers in, and collaborating with our longtime leadership partners at the Kansas City Public Library. Typically for the first 6 or 7 years, every one of these meetings was held in person at our central library branch. And we are still alternating between in-person and remote meetings. But the fact that we've got a lot of engaged partners in Kansas City and everybody's playing, you know, a uniquely value-added role. It does make the challenge of having one collaborative application to represent the funding needs of the area, something that we have found to be somewhat challenging, but it's challenging for all the right reasons, because we do have so many players involved, and we do have a really passionate community when it comes to you know, achieving what digital equity is all about. So with that, I'm going to close our meeting by just reminding everyone that our next meeting, which will be in June, is going to be an in-person meeting. It's going to be at MARC. You see the address there on Broadway, and it is going to be part of the what Marlene referenced. It's basically a follow-up to this listening type session that is referred to as Connecting All Missourians. And we're going to be starting a little bit earlier. Normally we start at 10:30 Central Time. We're going to start at 10 a.m. and it's going to go till noon. So any questions on that, just let me or Wendy or any of the steering council members know. Wendy, I'm going to finally hand it over to you. If there's anything additional you'd like to add, just on behalf of the coalition work or on behalf of the library.
You've done such a great, thorough job. I don't have anything else to add. I think
All right.
we do get a few minutes early, like you said.
Good stuff. All right. Well, guys, everyone have a great rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. And don't forget, tomorrow's the Derby Day. So pick your horse. All right. Have
Thank
fun,
you.
everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, everyone.